On a night of hard snow and flashing police lights, a motherless Black Panther cub was carried out of an illegal roadside
Poor
zoo.
thing, you must be
While at
freezing.
that very same hour, a
Let's get him
tiny
inside,
white
quick.
farm puppy was left in a beat-up truck at the gate of Hart Ridge Sanctuary. Not even Dr. Emily Hart believed they'd both survive, much less become family. Yet over the next 2 years, a predator and a ranch dog would pull each other back, again and again, from the thin line between instinct and love, between written law and simple human mercy. And in the end, the state would have to decide: rip them apart forever, or make an exception the rulebook had never even imagined. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. By the time Dr. Emily Hart saw the flashing red and blue lights bouncing off the snow, her fingers had gone numb around the steering wheel. The wind came in hard gusts across the Colorado Rockies, pushing her old truck sideways on the narrow road. Jake's pickup was already parked outside the sagging cabin ahead, Sheriff's SUV right behind it, headlights cutting through the swirl of white. She killed the engine and stepped out into the cold. Snow crunched under her boots, the air so sharp it stung her lungs. Jake met her halfway, collar turned up, breath a white cloud in the dark. "Illegal exotics, that's what the sheriff said," he muttered. "If this place loses power tonight, they're done." Emily nodded, tightening her scarf. She had spent a lifetime in veterinary care, raising strays and patching up broken creatures. But the words "illegal exotics" still sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. Animals bought on credit cards and kept like status symbols, then abandoned when the bills and the reality arrived. Inside, the cabin smelled of bleach and fear. Cages lined the walls, metal and wire stacked where furniture should have been. A thin python in a glass tank, a pair of frightened macaws, a small troop of lemurs clinging to one another like children. The power flickered, giving the room a heartbeat. "In here," the sheriff called. Emily followed the sound to a back room. The door stuck, then gave way with a groan. The first thing she saw was the blood on the straw. Not much, but in the cold it looked darker than it was. A Black Panther lay on her side, ribs moving in tiny, shallow shivers. Her eyes were glassy and unfocused, fixed on something far beyond the bare light bulb overhead. At her belly, pressed into her, was a single cub. "Oh," Emily breathed. The cub was so small she could cover it with one hand. Its fur was wet and clumped, its mouth searching blindly, paws kneading at a body that was already letting go. The mother's breath rattled once more, twice, then stopped. The room went very quiet. Jake swore under his breath. "I know," she said automatically, though she didn't, not yet. She dropped to her knees in the straw, fingers going to the mother's neck, then chest. Nothing. The cub squeaked, a thin, offended sound, as if the world's betrayal was a personal insult. "She's gone," Emily said softly. She looked at the sheriff. "How long since the tip came in?" "An hour, maybe. We got here as fast as we could." He shifted, uncomfortable. "You tell me, Doc, you think the little one's got a chance?" Emily's brain moved into the litany she knew as well as any mortgage paperwork or health insurance premium. Body temperature, dehydration, colostrum window, 20% odds, at best, for an orphaned cub this week. She could hear her late husband's voice in her head from those old wildfire deployments. "You don't have to win every battle, Em. You just have to show up for the ones you can." She slid her hands under the cub. It was a hot, fragile knot of life, all bones and pulse. The tiny jaws latched onto the edge of her glove, chewing uselessly. "Get me a blanket from the truck," she told Jake, "and the emergency milk replacer. If we don't get something warm into this baby in the next hour, pet insurance won't mean a thing. Nothing will." He gave a quick, grim nod and disappeared. An hour later, they were back on the mountain road, the illegal zoo behind them, the sheriff hauling birds and snakes in his own convoy. The cub was tucked inside Emily's coat, pressed against the heat pack she'd strapped to her chest. Every few minutes, she slid a finger to its nose to feel the damp warmth, counting each breath like a promise. The lights of Heart Ridge Sanctuary finally appeared around a bend, a soft glow against the storm. This had been a regular cattle farm once, long before Emily and her husband turned it into a place for battered horses, broken-legged elk, old farm dogs whose families had moved away. After his death in that wildfire, with the life insurance barely covering the hospital bills and repairs, everyone had told her to sell, refinance the place, start fresh. Instead, she kept the ridge and cut every expense she could, relying on donations and stubbornness. Tonight, it felt like the whole gamble was arriving at her gates in a bundle of damp black fur. Jake hopped out first and ran to open the barn door that doubled as a treatment room. Wind followed them in, whining under the eaves. Emily laid the cub in a padded crate under a heat lamp, adjusting the dial with the care she used to devote to her retirement planning spreadsheets. 20 minutes until the next feed, she murmured, more to herself than to Jake. That thing's going to be a 200-pound problem if it makes it, he said, not unkindly. You know Perez is going to be all over our home insurance if he hears Panther and Sanctuary in the same sentence. We're not there yet, Emily replied. Tonight, it's just a baby. A horn beeped outside, short and anxious. Jake frowned. You expecting anyone? Emily wasn't. She followed him to the front drive, boots slipping on the fresh layer of snow. A battered pickup sat crooked by the gate, engine still warm, headlights on. The driver's side door hung open, but there was no one in sight, only the wind and the whine of the tires cooling. On the back seat, in the spill of light from Jake's flashlight, sat a sagging cardboard box. There was a blanket inside the box, and under the blanket, a small white shape. A puppy, maybe 8 weeks old, fur the color of fresh milk. It blinked up at them, shivering, then tried to wag its tail and sit up at the same time, bumping its nose on the edge of the box. That's a Maremma or some kind of guardian dog, Jake said. Some rancher dropped it off. Emily found the note taped to the side, ink running from melted snow. 3 lines, in a shaky hand. Can't afford her. Please help. She's good. The puppy's eyes met hers, wide and trusting, as if the world had always been kind. Emily gathered the box into her arms, feeling the weight of it, the contrast to the almost weightless cub inside the barn. Welcome to Heart Ridge, kiddo, she whispered. Looks like you picked a hell of a night. Back inside, the sanctuary felt smaller than ever. One room held a Black Panther cub whose mother lay dead in a filthy back room on the mountain. In her arms, a white guardian puppy whose owner had vanished into the storm rather than face one more bill. 2 orphans, born into different worlds, arriving at the same place on the same night. Jake watched her, reading the lines on her face. We can find a home for the pup easy, he said. If the panther makes it at all, Perez will want it in a high-security facility. Maybe it's better if their paths don't cross. Emily looked from the glowing heat lamp in the treatment room to the cardboard box on the counter. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, and the mountains loomed like a dark wall. Maybe, she said quietly, or maybe this ridge is big enough for more than one kind of story. The puppy yawned, showing tiny white teeth, and somewhere behind the closed door, the panther cub gave a thin, protesting cry. Emily stood between them, feeling the weight of 2 futures pressing in from either side, and knew that whatever choice she made tonight would echo across the next 2 years of all their lives. The storm kept building after midnight. By 2 in the morning, the power went out with a soft click, taking the hum of the heaters with it. The barn settled into a deep, uneasy quiet. Emily's phone buzzed with a text from the electric co-op. Cruise delayed. Estimated restoration unknown. She stared at the screen, then at the thermometer on the treatment room wall as the red needle began its slow slide downward. The Panther cub was tucked under the heat lamp, but without the barn's main furnace, the cold would seep in fast. The puppy in the office crate was already shivering under her blanket. Emily rubbed the bridge of her nose, feeling the old familiar pressure of too many needs and not enough resources. Veterinary care, feed, mortgage, the rising cost of everything from hay to home insurance. Sometimes it felt like Heart Ridge was hanging on by a shoestring and prayer, no matter how many animal sanctuary donations trickled in online. Jake came in with a flashlight, beam cutting across the room. "Main line's down," he said. "I've got the generator running for the house, but it won't handle both the house and the barn all night. We've got space heaters for the bedrooms. Out here, not so much." Emily looked at the cub's tiny chest rising and falling. "They can't be in separate cold rooms," she said. "Not at these weights. I can warm bottles and blankets, but without steady heat." Jake followed her gaze. "You're not thinking what I think you're thinking. I'm thinking we have one small room we can keep warm with the propane heater," she answered. "The office. No drafts. If we set both crates in there, side by side, they'll share a little body heat. It buys us hours." "That's a Panther, Em." His voice stayed low, but it had an edge. 6 months from now, there'll be lawyers and wildlife officers and every clause in the liability policy thrown at us. You really want to start the story with "we put her next to a dog"? For now, she's the size of a house cat, Emily said, and that puppy has twice her body fat. I'm not talking about letting them loose. 2 crates, 2 blankets, 1 heater. That's it. He hesitated, then sighed. "All right, but if Officer Perez ever asks, I'm telling him it was your idea." Together they moved the crates, one careful step at a time. The puppy whined when Jake lifted her box, then settled, nose poking through the bars, as if searching for the source of all this commotion. The cub let out a thin growl when the crate shifted, but it was more protest than threat. In the office, Emily lit the propane heater and watched the thermometer begin to climb. She set the cub's crate closest to the warm air, then slid the puppy's crate alongside it, leaving just enough space that the bars nearly touched. Black fur in one, white in the other, their outlines a mirror image in opposite shades. The puppy was the first to notice. She sat up, ears pricking, and edged forward until her nose bumped the shared corner. The cub froze, golden eyes fixed on the pale face peering in. For a heartbeat, Emily saw every horror story she'd ever read about exotic pets gone wrong, the kind that made headlines and drove up insurance premiums and made online fundraising for animal rescue sound like a luxury instead of a lifeline. Then the cub did something small and remarkable. Instead of striking, she sniffed. A quick, uncertain breath, then another. The puppy's tail thumped against the crate wall, a soft, osy, hopeful drum. She gave a tiny whine and licked the bar once, tentative. "Look at that," Jake murmured. His flashlight beam softened. "Little fool doesn't know she's supposed to be dinner." "Maybe she knows something we don't," Emily said quietly. For a long moment she simply watched them. Black nose and white nose, pressed as close as the metal would allow, steam from their breaths mingling in the cold air. It took her back, in a rush, to a tiny motel room years ago when her husband came back from another wildfire deployment, smelling of smoke and fatigue. He had collapsed on the bed. Fully clothed, boots still on, and their old shepherd mix had climbed up beside him, pressed her muzzle into his soot-streaked neck, and refused to move until morning. "You don't always get to pick who saves you," he'd said then, half asleep. "Sometimes it's the one who happens to be there when the world falls apart." Now, in the flicker of the propane flame, Emily felt that same truth humming in the air. She could keep every rule, follow every guideline, send the cub to a concrete enclosure and the puppy to a suburban backyard with premium pet insurance and a fenced lawn. Everyone would say that was the responsible thing. Or she could admit that what was happening in front of her, this quiet, cautious curiosity between black and white, might be the start of a different kind of story. Jake shifted beside her. "So this is just for tonight," he said. "For heat." "For now," she agreed. Then, after a beat, "But if they keep reaching for each other through those bars, I'm not going to pretend I don't see it." He snorted softly. "And then what?" "Then we do what we always do," Emily said. "We show up. We set rules. We stay between them and the worst of their instincts. And we pray the world gives us time to figure it out." She turned down the flashlight and left the office door cracked, just enough to hear if anything went wrong. Behind her, the storm raged on, but in the small, warm room, 2 orphans lay down at last, each pressed to the corner closest to the other, as if the shape of another heartbeat was the only thing that made sense in a night where nothing else did. By morning, the storm had blown itself out, leaving the world outside hard and bright. The power came back with a pop just after sunrise, lights flickering on, one by one through the barn in the old farmhouse. Emily poured herself a mug of coffee that had been sitting in the pot all night and tasted burnt grounds and relief. When she opened the office door, a soft chuff greeted her. The panther cub was already awake, pressed to the corner of her crate, watching the white puppy in the crate beside her. The puppy was sprawled on her back, paws in the air, snoring gently. As the light changed, she startled, rolled over, and went nose first into the bars that separated them. The cub flinched, then held her ground. "Well, look at you two," Emily murmured. "You made it through the night." The puppy scrambled to her feet, tail wagging so hard her whole body swayed, walked straight to the shared corner, and bumped her nose against the place where black fur waited. The cub sniffed, gave a tiny huff, and did not move away. "Luna," Emily said, testing the name she'd thought of sometime between bottle feedings. "I think that one belongs to you. And you?" She looked at the cub. "You're too much shadow to be anything but Raven." The name stuck in the quiet room like they'd been waiting there all along. Later that morning, when the chores were done and the emails about feed bills and late donations were answered, a small hatchback rolled up the drive. A young woman in a knitted cap climbed out, ponytail swinging, a backpack slung over one shoulder. "Morning, Dr. Hart," she called. "Mia Lopez, here for the internship. I got your email." Emily had almost forgotten she'd agreed to take a student this winter, hoping an extra pair of hands might help her stay ahead of the work and the mortgage. Now she was suddenly grateful. Mia's brown eyes lit up when she saw the crates. Is that a panther?" she whispered. "Technically, a black jaguar, best we can tell," Emily said. "And that's Luna, some kind of guardian dog mix, both orphans, both trouble." Mia crouched carefully, keeping her fingers clear of the bars. "Hey there, pretty girl," she said to Raven, then glanced at Luna. "And you, Miss Snowball." Luna pressed eagerly against the metal, whining softly. After a cautious moment, Raven mirrored her, nose pressed so close, their whiskers tangled for a heartbeat. Mia's hand went automatically to her phone. "Mind if I record this?" she asked. "People love rescue stories. It might help with fundraising, crowdfunding, sponsors, all that. My cousin's sanctuary gets half their vet bills covered that way, cheaper than any pet insurance." Emily hesitated, thinking of privacy, of scrutiny, of what might happen if the wrong eyes saw a black cat that would one day weigh more than a grown man playing nice with a farm dog. Then she thought of the last heating repair bill, the rising cost of hay. The email from the bank about refinancing options that had gone straight to spam because she couldn't bear to read the word mortgage one more time. "Record," she said, "but keep my face out of it." Within a week, a 30-second clip of Raven and Luna touching noses through the bars had circled the internet more times than Emily could count. Mia showed her the numbers in the evenings. Views ticking up, little hearts floating under the video, comments from strangers who wrote like they were talking about their own family. "I needed this today. Looks like my black cat in my neighbor's lab. If that panther hurts that puppy, I'm gonna need a good attorney." There were jokes, arguments, people tagging friends who loved animal rescue videos and true crime podcasts in equal measure. Somewhere under it all were a few small donations that helped pay for vaccines, formula, and a space heater Mia found on sale. In the barn, away from the glowing screens, the two animals kept writing their own quieter story. Under supervision, Emily began to open the puppy's crate during playtime while Raven stayed inside hers. Luna would tumble out, clumsy paws skidding on the concrete, then trot back to the front of Raven's crate and bow, forelegs stretched, tail high. Raven watched, puzzled, then stretched one black paw through the bars, claws carefully sheathed. It became their ritual. Luna bowing, Raven reaching, two children on opposite sides of a fence they didn't build. One afternoon, when snowmelt had turned the ground to slick mud, Luna misjudged her footing. She came running too fast toward the crate, tried to stop, and her paws shot out from under her. For a split second she was nothing but white fur and flailing legs, sliding straight toward Raven's outstretched paw. Jake, watching from the corner, sucked in a breath. Mia's phone dipped. Emily felt every muscle in her own body lock. Raven had a choice in that instant: instinct or something else. Raven chose. Instead of striking, her paw flipped, pads down, claws tight against her toes. She planted it like a little black stopper, taking the weight of Luna's chest as the puppy slid into her. The impact rocked the crate. Luna let out an oof of surprise and flopped sideways, legs splayed, more insulted than hurt. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Luna scrambled up, shook herself, and trotted right back, tail spinning. She pressed her nose against Raven's paw like she was thanking her. Jake let out the breath he'd been holding. "Well, I'll be damned," he said softly. She braced for her instead of swatting her. Emily felt her own shoulders drop. "That's the difference between a reflex and a choice," she said. "We can work with a choice." Maya, who'd frozen with her phone halfway up, finally hit stop. "Sorry," she whispered. "I forgot to keep filming." "That one can be just for us," Emily replied. "Not everything has to go online." Still, the moment changed something. From then on, Raven seemed more aware of where her paws landed, how much strength she used. When Luna bounced too close, Raven would rise, turn sideways, and nudge with a shoulder instead of a swat. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough for Emily to decide the next step. They moved from through the bars to on the same floor, 1 inch at a time. At first it was just Luna on a long leash, Raven still inside the crate, with the door latched. Luna would circle the crate, stopping every few steps to bow, forelegs stretched, rear in the air. Raven watched, head cocked, tail twitching. One day she mimicked the bow, her own front paws sliding forward, chin dropping to the floor. Mia nearly dropped her phone. "That's it," Emily said. "If we're going to keep letting them learn from each other, we need rules." So the rules began. No teeth on ears, no chasing each other within 10 feet of the goat pen, no pouncing without a warning sound first. If Emily blew the orange whistle, both animals had to stop what they were doing and look at her. If play got too rough, everyone took a break. Mia turned the rules into a little game. She painted a piece of scrap wood with "House Rules" in crooked letters and hung it on the barn wall. Every time Raven and Luna mastered something, she added it in bright paint. "No biting ears" went up first. "Come to the whistle" came next. It made good footage, and the internet ate it up. Raven and Luna's Rules, Episode 3. Mia narrated one afternoon, her voice low so as not to startle them. Today we practice stopping on cue. Remember, kids, listening might just save your life and keep your health insurance premiums down. Emily snorted. You sound like one of those commercials. If it helps people remember, I'll sound like a car insurance ad, Mia said. Besides, these clicks are paying for formula and that new kennel. You'd be surprised how many strangers out there will put $20 on a credit card for a good rescue story. In the middle of all that, a new figure started appearing at the fence line. Noah, the thin boy from the neighboring property, would ride his bike up after school, park it by the gate, and sit cross-legged in the dirt outside the barn, backpack still on. He said he was there to do homework with goats, but his eyes never left Raven and Luna. Emily noticed the bruises on his forearm one day when he reached to scratch one of the older dogs through the wire. Walking into doors again? She asked gently. Locker doors, he said, attempting a smile. It's fine. They're just bored. He fell quiet when Raven padded up to the inside of the fence, eyes searching. Luna, off-leash but under Emily's watchful eye, trotted up beside her, shoulder to shoulder with the big black shadow. For a second, with the slanting light behind them, you couldn't see the wire at all. Just two silhouettes, one dark, one light, standing together. Noah's breath caught. They don't look scared of each other, he said. They've got rules, Emily answered. Makes it easier to be brave. He thought about that for a moment. Wish we had some at my school. Mia, filming from a distance, caught the way Noah's hand relaxed on the fence, fingers no longer curling in on themselves. Later that night, she added a line to the video description about Hart Ridge, not just rescuing animals, but giving people a place to breathe. The comments filled with stories from grandparents and veterans, folks talking about their own quiet bruises and the pets that helped carry them. The world online only saw 30 seconds at a time. Raven rolling onto her back while Luna chewed gently at her paws through the bars. Emily's whistle cutting through chaos, both animals, snapping their heads toward her like kids caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Underneath those little clips, though, day after day, hour after hour, the strange family on the ridge was learning how to live together. Every evening, when the last chore was done and the emails about grain prices and mortgage rates were answered as best they could be, Emily would stand in the barn doorway with a cup of coffee and watch them. Luna would curl up just outside Raven's enclosure, white fur pressed to the wire. Raven would lie with her back against the same spot from the inside, eyes half closed, tail thumping lazily. Two shapes, black and white, separated by steel and law and common sense, and yet somehow already moving in the same rhythm. Emily knew it couldn't stay this simple. Officer Perez would come back. Forms would have to be signed, boxes checked, liability discussed, in words that made her head ache. But for now, on this cold ridge in Colorado, a dog and a panther were teaching each other how not to hurt the one they loved, and teaching the humans around them what it meant to build a family out of rules, patience, and an unlikely kind of grace. The first time one of Mia's clips crossed 1 million views, Emily didn't even know what to feel. Pride wasn't quite the word. It was more like standing on the porch in a lightning storm, watching the sky light up and not sure yet where the bolt would land. On Mia's phone, Raven and Luna trotted side by side along the inside of the enclosure, noses bumping the wire, snowflakes melting on black fur and white. The caption read, "Orphaned Panther finds a best friend in a farm puppy." The comments scrolled by so fast Emily could barely read them. I could watch this all day. That cat's gonna snap one day. You better have good pet insurance and a good lawyer. This is why my home insurance keeps going up. Folks doing wild stuff with predators. Mia skimmed past the sour ones and showed Emily the small bright numbers underneath. Look, People are sending $10, $20, even $50 through the link. That covers almost all of last month's vet bill. This is how sanctuaries survive now. Online banking and strangers with soft hearts. Emily watched Raven on the tiny screen, then looked out the barn door at the real animal stretched in the winter sun, Luna pressed against the fence beside her. "I'm glad they care," she said. "I just hope they understand this isn't a fairy tale. Out here, if something goes wrong, it's my mortgage and my license and my neck on the line." It wasn't the strangers who caused the first real trouble. It was the neighbor. Helen Green watched the same clip sitting at her kitchen table, her laptop propped on a stack of seed catalogs. She had run cattle on the adjoining land for 30 years. She had also buried 3 calves after a mountain lion found a gap in her fence one bad spring. Watching a panther, any panther, pace so close to the property line made her jaw set. "Fool woman," she muttered, zooming in on Raven's face. "That thing is not a house pet." She took screenshots. At the feed store the next morning, she opened her laptop on the counter and showed the other ranchers. They gathered around, caps tilted back, lines deepening around their eyes. "That's next door to you?" one man whistled. "You sure your liability coverage is high enough?" "Liability, hell," another said. "If that cat ever gets loose and hits my herd, I'm sending the vet bills straight to her, or to whoever approved this circus." By the end of the week, someone had forwarded the video and Helen's email to the State Wildlife Office. By the end of the month, Officer Daniel Perez pulled his SUV into the gravel drive at Hart Ridge with a clipboard on his passenger seat and a crease between his brows. Emily met him at the gate, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Morning, Daniel," she said. "I figured you'd be back sooner or later." "You figured right," he answered. His smile was still there, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Got a little packet of concern from your neighbors and a few printouts from the internet. Seems you've gone viral, Doc." They walked the fence line together. Raven watched them from her favorite rock, head high, tail relaxed. Luna trotted at Emily's heel, occasionally darting ahead to sniff at Perez's boots. "I'm not here to shut you down today," he said. "But I do have to ask some questions. When I signed off on that temporary permit, the paperwork said quarantine and no contact with domestic animals. Now, from what I'm seeing," he gestured toward Luna, who had pushed her nose happily through the mesh until Raven leaned down to sniff her. Emily felt the old pinch between her eyes. "I know what the form said. At the time, Raven was the size of my forearm, and we didn't know if she'd live the week. I also didn't know someone would dump a guardian puppy on my driveway the same night." Perez watched the animals a long moment. "They look comfortable," he admitted. "That doesn't mean the law goes away. Predators are classified the way they are for a reason. If something happens, it's not just your heart that gets broken. It's public safety, lawsuits, all of it. Your home insurance company would have a stroke." "So what are you telling me?" Emily asked quietly. "In plain English." "In plain English," he sighed. "I've got a formal complaint from Ms. Green and 2 other landowners. They're asking why there's a panther on this ridge at all, much less playing kissy face with a dog. I can't ignore that. The department will give you some time, because we know you, and we know this place. But not forever." They stood in silence, listening to the wind in the fence wire. "Here's what I can do," Perez went on. "I can recommend a 6-month review instead of immediate transfer. In that time, you beef up the enclosure, put more distance between Raven and anything she could hurt, and you document everything: training, feeding, medical. No free roaming, no off-leash contact. You make it boring. Sound dull enough on paper that my boss doesn't get nervous." Emily's throat felt dry. 6 months. A date circled in red on a calendar that was already too full of numbers, feed invoices, donation receipts, the next balloon payment on the house. "And if I can't?" she asked. "Then I'll have to sign the transfer order," Perez said. "She'd go to a facility with proper barriers. They'd probably use her in an education program. It wouldn't be a cage in someone's backyard, but it wouldn't be this." He nodded toward Luna, who had rolled onto her side, paws poking through the wire, Raven's paw resting gently on the other side. "I'm not thrilled about that any more than you are." That night, the kitchen table at Hartridge became a war room. Emily sat at one end with a yellow pad, Jake at the other with a calculator, Mia in the middle with her laptop open to a page full of comments and tiny dollar signs. "Online, people already think of them as a pair," Mia said. "If we suddenly shut down the videos, they're going to ask questions. And the donations, well, they've made the difference these last few months. You know that." "I also know I can't raise a cat like that just to have her yanked away at the end because I didn't follow the rules," Emily said. "I don't want to give Raven a taste of family and then hand her to strangers." Jake tapped the calculator, then set it down. "We're damned either way," he said. "But if this story keeps paying for hay and meds, we at least have a fighting chance of making the place look like what Perez needs to see. High fences, double gates, backup locks." He said boring. Let's give him boring with a smile. "Boring on paper," Mia said, "not boring on camera." Outside, the sky went from blue to purple to black. In the barn, Noah stayed later than usual, sitting by the fence, while Raven and Luna dozed in their usual spot, black back against white fur through the mesh. "Are they going to take her away?" he asked, without looking up. Emily leaned against the post beside him. "I don't know yet," she said honestly, "but I'm going to use every day they've given us to prove that what's happening here is worth fighting for." Noah nodded slowly. "Maybe if they see what I see, they'll change their mind," he said. "They're like bookends. My teacher says taking one bookend away makes the whole shelf fall down." In the dim barn light, with the smell of hay and warm dog and wild cat in her lungs, Emily decided that if the world was going to tell them this bond was not allowed, then the world was at least going to have to look them in the eye when it did, and in the months ahead, when instinct finally crashed against all those rules, the stakes Perez had just laid out would make every choice, every mistake, feel that much heavier. Spring came late to the ridge. Snowmelt turned the lower pasture into a patchwork of brown and green, slick in spots where the sun hadn't quite done its work. The air had that restless feel of a season trying to change its mind. Emily picked a flat stretch for that afternoon's training. She clipped a long line to Luna's harness, checked the orange whistle at her neck, and walked the dog out into the open, with Jake and Mia flanking them. Raven paced along the inside of her enclosure, head up, golden eyes tracking every move. "Same drill as yesterday," Emily said. "We do a little recall, a little leave it, then everybody goes home in one piece." "You sound like one of those retirement planning commercials," Jake muttered. "Low risk, steady returns." "After the week we've had, I'll take low risk," Emily replied. She still heard Officer Perez's voice in her head at night, threaded in with talk of liability and home insurance and what would happen if anything went wrong on her land. Out here, a single veterinary emergency could cost more than some folks' car payments. That was why people bought pet insurance and hoped they'd never need it. She didn't have that luxury with Raven. The cat was her responsibility, full stop. They started simple. Mia stood 10 yards away, holding Luna, while Emily walked back and blew the whistle. The dog came bounding, ears flapping, sat crooked in front of her, tail sweeping the damp grass. They did it again and again, mixing in sits and downs until Luna's tongue lolled and her eyes sparkled. Along the fence, Raven mirrored them, walking when Luna walked, stopping when she stopped. When Emily blew the whistle, Raven's head snapped toward her, too, a little frown on her dark face, as if she were trying to puzzle out the pattern. "Smart girl," Mia called softly, half to the dog, half to the panther. "You're both gonna ace this test." They were on the last pass when it happened. A small group of mule deer chose that moment to pick their way out of the tree line above the pasture, hooves delicate on the thawing ground. They weren't close, not really, but they were moving, brown shapes against the pale grass. One lifted its head, ears swiveling, and then the whole group broke into an easy lope along the ridge. Raven froze. Every line of her body changed. The loose, companionable pacing was gone. She lengthened, muscles coiling, tail stiffening. Her pupils blew wide until the gold was only a thin ring. "Emily," Jake said quietly. "I see her," Emily answered. Her hand went to the whistle, but some part of her was a beat too slow, thinking of training and compliance instead of the older, deeper code written into Raven's bones. The deer picked up speed. So did Raven. She surged along the fence, paws eating distance, breath puffing in hard bursts. The sound of her claws on packed dirt hit a note that made the hair on Emily's arms rise. Luna, sensing the sudden shift, did what she always did when something ran. She joined in. She lunged forward on the long line, barking, head high, chasing a game she didn't understand. "Luna, wait!" Emily yanked at the line, but the dog's momentum on the muddy ground was too much. Her paws slipped. 1 second she was running. The next she was airborne, sliding sideways toward the stretch of fence where Raven had just cut across. Time slowed. Emily could see everything at once. The deer flashing along the hill, Raven's body slamming to a halt against the wire, Luna's white flank skidding into the reach of those black paws. Raven struck. It was not a killing blow. It was not a calculated swipe. It was the raw swing of a body trying to stop its own motion, claws half-sheathed, paw arcing out. It caught Luna high on the shoulder. The sound was soft, a wet rip more felt than heard. Luna screamed. The dog rolled, then scrambled up, three-legged, eyes wide with pain and disbelief. Red bloomed on her white fur, startling and bright as a flare. Emily's stomach dropped. "Hold the cat!" Jake shouted, although Raven was already pressed back against the fence as if she herself had been struck. Emily ran to Luna, dropping to her knees in the mud. Her hands were suddenly all business. Pressure, assess, breathe, while her heart hammered so loud she could barely hear Mia crying out behind her. "It's bad, but we can fix it," she said, more for herself than for the dog. The gash along Luna's shoulder was open, but not catastrophic. Muscle, not artery. Stitches, antibiotics, time. The kind of wound any emergency animal hospital would patch up on a busy Saturday, send home with a bottle of pills and a paper collar. But it was Raven's doing. That was the part no like or comment could soften. By the fence, Raven stood rigid, staring at her own paw as if it belonged to someone else. There was blood on the fur between her toes. She turned her head, looked at Luna once, just once, and then spun away, bolting for the far corner of the enclosure. She climbed onto her highest platform and stayed there, sides heaving, tail wrapped tight around her. Emily carried Luna to the treatment room, hand steady, voice calm, all the while listening to the echo of Helen Green's warning. "That cat's gonna snap one day. You better have a good lawyer." When it was over, wound cleaned, stitched, bandaged, pain meds easing Luna into a woozy sleep, Jake stood in the doorway with his arms folded. "That's it," he said. "We're done. No more shared play, no more cute videos. We can't risk it, Em. If this were some suburb with sidewalks, folks would be calling their attorney already and asking if their home insurance covers exotic cats next door." Emily rubbed a smear of dried blood off her wrist. "She didn't mean to," she said, hearing how thin it sounded even as she spoke. You saw her. She panicked. So did Luna." "It doesn't matter what she meant," Jake said. "What matters is what happens when something spooks her. We've had our warning shot." Mia hovered behind him, eyes red. "We don't have to post any of this," she said quickly. "No one online has to know. We can slow down, focus on updates about Luna's recovery, talk about responsible pet care, pet insurance, all that. But please, don't make me film a goodbye video." Emily didn't answer. She walked back to the barn instead. Raven hadn't moved from the high platform. At the sound of footsteps, her tail twitched, but she didn't look down. The band of sunlight that usually warmed that spot had shifted. She lay in shadow now, a dark curve against a darker wall. "Hey, girl," Emily said softly. "It's done. She's bandaged. She's going to be all right." No response. No chuff. No blink. Just a barely perceptible tightening of muscles. Emily stepped closer, fingers curling around the wire. Up close, she could see the faint rust-brown stain on the boards where Raven had scraped her paw clean, as if trying to erase the evidence. "You're not the only one whose first reflex was wrong," she went on. "I should have blown that whistle the second I saw the deer. I should have shortened the line. That's on me." Still nothing. The panther's gaze stayed fixed on some point far beyond the fence. That night, for the first time since the snowstorm that brought them together, Raven did not come down to press her back against the spot where Luna usually slept. Luna whined once from the clinic room, then sank into medicated dreams. The space outside the enclosure stayed empty. In the morning, her breakfast dish was untouched. Raven had made another choice now, one no human had asked of her. She was exiling herself, shrinking her world to one high platform of wood and wire. And for the first time, Emily wondered if love and rules and all the careful training in the world would be enough to pull her back down again. Luna healed faster than Emily dared hope. Within a couple of weeks, the stitches came out, leaving a pink line under the fur that would fade with time. What didn't fade so easily was the space between her and Raven. On Perez's advice and Jake's insistence, Emily kept them separated. Luna walked the lower pasture on a leash, learning to heel and stop on the whistle with a seriousness that made her look older than her age. Raven stayed behind higher fences and double gates, an extra run of welded wire between her and the rest of the world. At night, she still climbed to the top platform and lay there, staring toward the clinic door where Luna slept, but she never came down to the back corner anymore. Sometimes Luna would limp, not from pain but from memory. She'd reach the edge of the barn and hesitate, as if expecting another flash of black and a sudden sting. Then she'd shake it off, ears flattening, and trot on. Dogs forgave faster than people, Emily thought, but they didn't forget. The rain started on a Thursday afternoon, a slow, steady sift across the ridge. By evening it had turned into a hard, drumming downpour that blurred the line between sky and ground. The little creek that ran along the pasture swelled, its usual gentle chatter deepening to a low growl. "Keep everybody up on the high side," Emily told Jake as they pulled feed into the sheltered pens. "Last thing we need is a goat getting stuck in the mud and a vet bill big enough to put our mortgage in the ground. Storm like this, we should have bought flood insurance instead of a new water heater," he said, half joking, half not. By nightfall, the lower field was a sheet of standing water. The creek, usually narrow and polite, had bulged over its banks, turning the bend near the old cottonwood into a churning brown tongue that licked higher with every minute. The wind drove the rain sideways, rattling the barn doors and making the electric lines hum. Luna hated thunder, but she hated being left out more. When there was a lull between claps, she slipped out behind Jake as he hauled another bale of straw to the goat shed. Noah, who had come up after school and stayed to help, saw her white shape vanish into the dark. "I'll grab her," he called, pulling up his hood and running after her before anyone could stop him. By the time Emily realized Luna wasn't at her usual spot by the clinic door, the dog was already halfway down the slope, nose to the ground, following the rich new smells of washed earth and wild things. The rain had carved fresh channels in the hillside, making treacherous seams beneath the grass. One gave way under her weight. Suddenly, Luna was sliding, paws scrabbling, straight toward the swollen creek. At the edge, a chunk of bank broke loose. She dropped with it, rolling onto a narrow ledge of mud and roots just above the racing water. One hind leg slipped in. The current grabbed it like a live thing and yanked. Luna yelped, claws clawing at the slick ground, front legs scrambling, chest pressed to the edge. The water rose to her belly, cold and relentless. Up in her enclosure, Raven heard the cry. She had heard Luna bark 100 times, whine and yip and sing along with the coyotes on the far ridge. This sound was different. It went through her like an electric shock, every hair rising along her spine. She ran to the front of the pen and saw only rain, saw Jake's flashlight bobbing, heard Noah shout something she couldn't make out. Then a gust tore the cloud cover just enough for a jagged slice of lightning to show her the creek. White fur, mud, water clawing up a body that had once pressed warm against hers through the wire. Raven didn't think. Thinking was what had pinned her to that high platform for 2 weeks, replaying the moment her paw broke skin. This was older than thought. She whipped around her pen, muscles coiling, looking for a way down. The new fence was solid, the gates double-locked, the posts sunk deep. On the back side, an old support board had been left when the original enclosure was expanded. Years of weather had softened it. Raven hit it once with her shoulder, and it held. She hit it a second time, harder, and felt the fibers crack. On the third strike, it gave way with a wet, splintering sound. She slid through the jagged gap into the rain. If Helen had been watching from her kitchen window, if the state had strapped a camera to that fence, the footage would have been the nightmare every attorney imagines when they talk about liability. A full-grown black panther loose on a flooded farm, no cage between her and the world. Any home insurance adjuster would have gone white. But Raven saw only the ledge and the dog. She ran low, body hugging the contour of the hill, claws biting into mud. Water sprayed her belly, stung her eyes. Luna's scent cut through the storm, sharp with fear. When she reached the edge, the ground crumbled under her weight. She dropped to her belly without thinking, splaying her legs to distribute her weight, and stretched her front half over the lip of the bank. Luna's collar was slick with mud and water. Raven tried to grab fur and felt her teeth scrape skin. Luna cried out, and Raven jerked back, heart pounding. Not that way, not again. She adjusted, jaw finding the thick webbing of the collar instead. Her teeth clamped down. The water tried to take the dog. The mud tried to take them both. Raven dug her hind claws into what was left of the bank, muscles screaming, and pulled. It was not graceful. It was a slow, ugly drag, 1/2 inches at a time. Twice the current nearly tore Luna free again. Twice Raven lunged farther out, until most of her own body hung over the drop, only her back paws and the tip of her tail braced on the ridge. "Hang on." Noah's voice, closer now, breaking with panic. "Luna, hang on." He slid down on his stomach, fingers reaching, grabbing for the dog's scruff as Raven heaved one last time. Between them, boy and cat, they hauled Luna up over the edge and onto the sodden grass. The dog collapsed in a shivering heap, coughing, water pouring from her coat. For a second, everything stopped. Raven's jaws loosened. Luna rolled onto her side, eyes glassy, then focused on the huge, dark head above her. She let out a weak, breathless sound and stretched her nose forward to bump Raven's. By the time Jake's boots pounded up behind them, flashlight beam cutting through the rain, that's what he saw. The boy, the dog, and the panther, all three caked in mud, clinging to the thin strip of earth between the raging water and the soaked pasture. Raven's sides heaved, but her ears were up, her body curled protectively between Luna and the creek. Jake's first instinct was the same as always. Get between wild, dishin, and tame, choose safety over trust. He grabbed Noah's collar and hauled him back, then reached for Luna's harness. Raven stiffened, not at the boy's removal, but at the separation from the dog. She shifted, ready to spring, not at him, Emily realized, as she skidded to a stop beside them, but back toward the water if Luna slipped again. "It's all right, girl," Emily said, forcing her voice steady. "We've got her now. You did it. You saved her. You can let go." Raven blinked, water dripping from her whiskers. Slowly, as if it cost her more than the pull against the current had, she backed up, one step, then another, until Luna lay fully in Emily's arms. Behind them the fence gaped open where the board had splintered. The thing everyone feared most had happened. The predator was out. And yet when Emily looked at Raven, soaked and shaking, and staring at the dog she'd just dragged from a flooded creek, she knew that whatever story the world might try to write about this night, the truth on the ridge would always start with a different sentence. When everything broke, the panther ran toward the danger, not away from it. By the time summer came around again, the scar on Luna's shoulder had all but disappeared under her thick white coat. The creek had settled back into its narrow bed, pretending it had never tried to take her. Only Raven still carried the storm in her bones. On quiet afternoons, when the sky grew heavy, she would pace the high edge of her enclosure and glance toward the bend in the water, as if checking that it stayed where it belonged. Life at Hart Ridge found a new rhythm. Every morning, Luna trotted to the fence as soon as she was let out, pressing her side to the mesh. Raven met her there, leaning into the same spot from the inside. They stood like that for a long minute, black and white, letting their breathing sink before the day began. Under strict rules and double gates, there were still shared moments. In a secured yard with 2 layers of fencing and 3 humans watching, Luna would lope along the inner run while Raven matched her stride on the other side, the wire between them more suggestion than barrier. At Emily's whistle, both would stop, sit, and look back over their shoulders like guilty kids. Mia filmed only pieces now, careful to show the safety measures, the boring parts officers and insurance companies like to see. The night of the flood became the spine of the story Mia was building. With Emily's blessing, she stitched together 2 years' worth of clips into a quiet documentary. Raven's shaky first steps under the heat lamp, Luna's clumsy bows, the training sessions, the accident in the pasture, the long weeks when the panther would not come down from her platform. Noah sat at the kitchen table and recorded a halting voiceover about the creek, and the way Raven had clamped her teeth on Luna's collar instead of her throat. "It doesn't have to be fancy," Emily told her. "It just has to be honest. If the state is going to decide their fate, let them see what we've seen." On the morning of the review, the barn had been swept, the fences walked twice, the paperwork spread out on Emily's worn dining table. Feed invoices, vet records, training logs, even the line in the budget where online donations had helped her keep the mortgage current when a busted well pump might have sunk them. Perez arrived with a woman from the wildlife department and a man in a plain suit who had the careful look of someone who spent a lot of time reading reports about liability and talking to attorneys. They watched the film in the small office where Raven and Luna had once shared their first night of warmth. The little heater in the corner hummed. Mia's footage filled the screen. Black paws learning to retract, white paws learning to slow down, a boy at a fence talking about bookends, a dark shape pulling a white one out of brown water. When it ended, no one spoke for a moment. "Any insurance adjuster who saw that busted fence would have a heart attack," the man in the suit said at last. "But I've seen a lot of worst-case scenarios. This isn't quite one of them." The door creaked then, and Helen Green stepped in, hat in hand. She had been invited as part of the Concerned Neighbors group, and Emily had braced herself for another round of warnings. Instead, Helen cleared her throat and looked straight at the officials. "I was the one who filed the first complaint," she said. "Those screenshots on the laptop? That was me. I've lost calves to lions. I don't like big cats near my property line, and I still don't. But that night in the storm, when I heard Noah yelling, I saw that black cat hit the fence and go through it like it was paper. I thought she was coming for my herd." She paused, eyes softening. "She went for the dog instead, and not the way I expected." She set her hat on the desk with a small thump. "I'm not asking you to pretend she's safe. I'm just saying she's not the monster I thought she was. If there's a way to keep her here without putting the rest of us in danger, I won't stand in the way of it." Perez sat back in his chair, looking from Emily to the screen, frozen on the image of Raven and Luna, nose to nose through the fence. He had the tired expression of a man weighing more than statutes. "On paper," he said slowly, "she's a dangerous, exotic predator. That doesn't change. The fencing stays. The double gates stay. You keep the logs, use that whistle until your last day on this ridge, and if anything even smells wrong, you call me before you call a lawyer. That's the deal." Emily nodded, heart pounding. "But," he went on, taking out his pen, "I'm going to recommend an exemption. Limited, reviewed every year, tied to this specific animal and this specific place. Because whatever else she is, she's also that dog's brother, and I think this sanctuary proves something we all say in our brochures about animal welfare and never really get to see. That instinct can be trained, and sometimes love beats the odds." He signed the form with a quick stroke. Outside, late light lay low over the Rockies, turning the grass to bronze. When the visitors had gone and the last gate was shut, Emily walked to the fence with Luna at her side. Raven was already there, as if she'd been waiting for the mood in the house to shift. Emily watched them press close, black fur and white, shoulders aligned. 2 years earlier, a lost cub and an abandoned puppy had arrived on the same storm-blown night, tied together only by bad luck and a woman stubborn enough to give them a chance. Now they stood on either side of the steel that would always separate them in some ways, still choosing each other. "Orphaned Panther," she said softly, more to herself than to them. "Best friend. 2 years of an unbelievable bond." Raven's tail flicked, slow and content. Luna sighed and leaned harder into the wire. Above them, the sky deepened from blue to indigo. The world beyond the ridge would go on arguing about what was safe and what wasn't, about risk and rules and all the things you buy policies and plans and insurance for. But here, on this small piece of Colorado ground, a black cat and a white dog had written their own exception into the record, one sunrise and one storm at a time. And for as long as Emily had breath and fences to mend, that would be enough. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Before you scroll away, tell me this. Do you believe a bond like theirs could really exist? If this story touched your heart, drop a 1 in the comments so I know you're still with me. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might just remind you that sometimes the wild loves us back in ways we'll never forget.